Al Lopus. I've been looking forward to this for a long, long time. You created an organization called the Best Christian Workplace, and it's an organization that's helped us at the rescue mission I work at, Light of Life in Pittsburgh. We've been using the assessment tool that you've created for 14 years. I didn't know we were using it that long. We had a meeting earlier today, and you informed me of that, and it's just been such a huge tool, and I'll let you explain what it is. But yeah, why don't you give us a little background about Best Christian Workplace and what you all do?
Well, first of all, Doug, let me say it's really a pleasure to be here on the podcast. Thanks for inviting me. And yeah, I look forward to our time together. Well, Best Christian Workplaces Institute, or as we call it, Best Christian Workplaces, I just love to tell the story of its creation. And, I often describe it as divine providence called and I answered the phone. And, but we provide employee engagement and organizational culture consulting to Christian-led organizations. So, a little background, really, and for leaders, the vision started for me in college soon after coming to faith. And I was a member of a team of Christians ministering to high school students, part of Young Life Ministry. And what really formed in my mind was the unity, the cohesion, the sense of common purpose, the love that we had for one another and those that we served was really significant. And it was like nothing I had ever experienced in my life before that. And I loved how members of the body with different gifts were able to work together for a common purpose. And what was the outcome? Well, people were attracted to our group and they would ask us, you guys are different. What makes you different? And then they would say, "Oh, I want what you have." And so I really experienced the attractive nature of a body of Christians that are flourishing, working together. And so after graduating from Penn State, I heard the still small voice of God call me into Christian business. And for 30 years, I served in the world of human resources, mostly human resource consulting, and served with a global human resource consulting firm for 21 of those years. And I experienced what that gave me a window into looking into so many different organizational cultures, hundreds of organizations, and some had great cultures and some not so much. And it really became an interest of mine to see, well, what are the unique factors that make good cultures versus those that aren't? And towards the end of that career, I started working with statewide business magazines in Washington and Oregon. I live in the Seattle area now. And they asked me to help determine who the best companies were to work for. And one of the services that we provided as a firm was an organizational engagement survey. So that helped me to kind of get some foundation and background as we worked with literally hundreds of companies from Boeing and Starbucks and those kinds of companies to even smaller ones back at that time. But, Doug, what happened was I read Bob Buford's book Halftime when I was about 45, and I just felt God calling me to do something different. So at age 50, I took what was considered early retirement from my firm. But just a month before, I received a call from Helen Lee representing Christianity Today magazine, and she asked me if I could help them do a survey to determine who the best Christian workplaces were. And so in the fall of 2002, we surveyed 87 organizations. In April 2003, now 20 years ago, we identified the top 40 Christian workplaces in the cover story of Christianity Today, and that was kind of the booming start of the best Christian workplaces. So now in 20 years, we've served over 1,500 Christian organizations, including churches, Christian mission, parachurch organizations, Christian education, and Christian-led businesses. And it's just been a great experience. And so I think about, much like my college experience, going back to that, our vision is that Christian workplaces actually set the standard as the best, most effective places to work in the world. So that's a little bit of the background and kind of the vision of where we are now and how we got there. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I first heard of you. I know this was a big moment for your company, but I always go to the Global Leadership Summit that Bill
Yeah.
Hybel started for years, and I remember he actually did an entire talk on the impact of that your organization had on his through the assessment. And so, can you talk about the assessment, what it is, what do you all measure, and how does that impact organizations?
Yeah, Doug, 2013 in August was when Bill spent 15 minutes talking about the transformation of their culture at Willow Creek. And then he talked about it again the next year, mentioning us both times. And, you know, when you have 120,000 Christian leaders hearing about the best Christian workplaces for the first time, that made a big difference in our work. But what we did there and what we do now is we have an assessment tool, an employee engagement survey. It's 56 questions for Christian organizations. It covers a waterfront of topics. And we basically ask organizations to have their employees complete that survey. And we're able to then, based on that survey, give them guidance on the current health of their culture, but then also identify specific areas that they're able to improve in. And what we've done is we've also worked with Seattle Pacific University's PhD program in industrial organizational psychology. So we have a scientific underpinning of the assessment. And based on surveying hundreds of thousands of employees in Christian organizations, we were able to do through a factor analysis and identify 8 keys that actually drive or boost employee engagement and well-being in Christian workplaces. And we've written a book about it, you know, the Road to Flourishing.
Yeah. Phenomenal book.
Yeah.
Phenomenal book. And so, yeah, let's talk about that, because the book is basically, you know, the outcome of you doing this for 20 years and what you found actually creates an engaging and flourishing culture within an organization. So you drop 8 keys or 8 keys to flourishment in the book. I would love to talk about all of them, but yeah, can you give a little more background into the 8 characteristics?
Yeah, so we kind of identified our dependent variable, our key flourish questions, and what are the keys that actually drive engagement in Christian-led organizations. So there are 8 of them. I'll just mention them. They're fantastic teams. They actually, it preaches, as they say in churches, because there's an acronym. F for fantastic teams, L for life-giving work, outstanding talent, uplifting growth, rewarding compensation, inspirational leadership, sustainable strategy, healthy communication. All of these are keys to employee engagement into flourishing workplaces in Christian organizations. And so we've also done a statistical analysis on which of these are most important, and it kind of varies by sector. But for most organizations, inspirational leadership is the key, is the primary driver of employee engagement in Christian workplaces. And I like to think of inspirational leadership as leadership that's God-breathed. That's the inspirational part. It's God-breathed. It includes Christian character, competence, and clearly focuses on the integrity and trust that leaders are able to have and build in an organization.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And, you know, we were talking a little bit earlier. So your data basically backs up, you know, the famous cliche John Maxwell quote that everything rises and falls on leadership. You found that to be true. I'm curious, you know, we live in a world where, you know, and Maxwell has even said things like this, you know, in the 80s, it was all about management. Then it went to, you know, one leader. And now it's much more of a team leadership. When you say inspirational leadership for an organization, is it the primary leader? Is it like, hey, the CEO, the executive director, or is it the leadership team? I'm just curious.
Say it's the leadership team. So, you know, the definition of culture, the way I look at it, it's kind of the way we do things around here. And, you know, for a long time, people realize, well, how things are done in an organization really is influenced by those that have the most authority. Now, so for smaller organizations, yeah, it might be just the senior leader, but for larger organizations, I mean, even 30 to 50 employees, it's more of the team, and the team has the impact on the culture in an organization. So I'm generally, I'll say, in particularly larger organizations, it's just not the top leader, but it's the leadership team working together to actually create the culture that exists. Whether it's a good culture or not so good culture, it's the leaders who are really influencing and creating it.
Yeah, that's so good. I want to go back to those characteristics in a moment, but a little bit more about the assessment, and I'll just share, my experience with the leaders listening. Again, we've been doing this at Light of Life for 14 years. I've probably been involved with that process for 10 of those years. But what I love about this, one, is it's anonymous, so it goes out to all staff. So I know a lot of times employees can actually fear giving feedback because, what if they know it's me? But it's completely anonymous. But then in the results, you can actually see a breakdown. You can see a breakdown by departments, which I love. And again, it doesn't give up anybody as far as an individual, but you can see how each department is functioning, each team is functioning. You can see how males, females, you have all these different demographics that really give you real key insight into what areas are really flourishing in your organization and those that aren't. And as a tool, I just think that's so powerful for a leadership team to actually. For me, it's a reality check, right? A leader's job is to define reality. And for me, this tool defines the reality of how your culture is actually doing. So I'm just curious, there's been times where we've been really pleased with the results. There's been other times where, our heart sinks into our stomach and it's like, oh man, can you just share your experience with, I think you share a story in the book that when you were interacting with the person with the team with the lowest score in history. Can you talk about that? And can organizations actually turn around a culture?
Yeah. So I love this story, and you're absolutely right. So it's a real organization. I protect the innocent there by giving it an anonymous name. But yeah, so this organization, they had two key leaders. We were at a conference, I think it was a Christian Leadership Alliance conference. They said, Al, we need some help with our culture. We know it's not good. And this was early on in the Best Christian Workplace experience. And so I said, we'd love to help you, sure. So the way we do this is we do an employee engagement survey. We ask your employees to complete this anonymous survey, and then we'll talk with you about the results. And I got the results back, and it was like, oh no. This is not good. This is bad. And I thought, then, while I have the gift of exhortation, I also realize it's how you communicate such news that makes a difference. And so I'm talking with these two leaders, the executive vice president and the senior director of human resources. And I'm saying, okay, so, well, you're right. Things are not very good. Oh, and they were saying, yes, okay, well, we know that, and I said, but they said, how bad is it? And I said, well, you're clearly in the lower quartile of all organizations that we've surveyed. And I was just kind of laying that out as well, let's just see what their reaction is. Oh, lower quartile. Well, yeah, that's not so good, but really, tell us now, how bad is it? Well, I said, well, you're in the lower 5 percentile. And then finally, it's like, well, you're really one of the lowest scores in the history of the survey. So
that's a fun day.
Yeah. So I was so pleased that they took the news and they said, okay, well, let's do what needs to be done to change this. And so we did focus groups. We call them discovery groups with all of the employees. We got the background information, and we started to put in place, keys that would help improve the health of their culture. And this was a toxic culture situation. And yet, Doug, with coaching, they were able to move their culture forward. Now here we are 18 years later, they have a flourishing workplace culture.
Wow.
And even with the same leaders, and I know that's a key thought that you're thinking about, even with the same leaders, they were able to move that culture by putting things in place. And they were able to create a really healthy culture within a couple of years. And it does take time. I mean, it takes time because people are, especially if it's been a bad culture over a number of years, to actually have employees believe that something positive is going to happen takes some time. But they worked at it. They improved their communication patterns. They improved their strategy work. They improved their planning. They improved just a whole number of things. that improve their situation. So, yeah, that is a warm story. And I just remember sitting at lunch, 3 years later, celebrating the improvement of their culture.
Well, yeah, and one, kudos to you, because without your tool and without you creating this, they would have never been aware, and the toxicity would have just continued. So thank God for this tool. But kudos to them. I mean, the courage that it takes, one, to look reality in the face and say, this is reality. We have a toxic culture and I'm willing to change. But then two, to actually stick with it. Yeah. And that leads to my next question. I'm curious, these leaders were able to turn around the organization. You previously mentioned, inspirational leadership is more often than not the biggest factor in a flourishing culture. How often, when you see whether it's organizations or departments that are toxic or not doing well when it comes to flourishing, how often does it just need a new leader in that position versus how often can leaders actually turn it around?
That's that's an interesting question. And it's not an easy question. And so whenever you ask a consultant or a consultant says that's an interesting question, it usually means the question is better than the answer. But no, here's what we found. We find it's really all about the level of trust that a leader has. So we work with new leaders, and so they're building trust. We work with leaders who want to change and can change, so they can build trust. And then some leaders must leave. And that's when trust cannot be rebuilt with the team that they're leading. And how often is that? It's not. And again, we can look at results and we can say, well, this team is not doing well. But the first thing is not to say that's because of bad leadership. Really, you can dig in and find, well, there's misperceptions, there's misunderstandings, there's whatever, is causing some unhealth in that area. But that's the first place that we encourage organizations to really look at. Okay, so maybe the leader needs some help and some guidance. They have the core capabilities and competencies to lead, but they just need some tools to help them do that. So that's the first place we start. And then, yes, unfortunately, we've seen many situations where a leader has broken trust to the degree that, and maybe they don't have the competence to step forward. And that's, yes, time for the leader to really think about a new situation.
Well, as a consultant, I would say that answer was better than the question. I didn't know where you were going to go with that. So, and I love that. I was telling you how my mentor and our executive director, Jarrell, was always encouraging me, be curious. Mm-hmm. And I think you said, the group that turned around their organization, they had study groups. I mean, it just sounds like they dove in and said, let's really hear, let's be curious and really see what the core issues are. And it sounds like clearly they were able to serve. So I think rather than just jumping into action based on assumption, coming with a posture of humility and curiosity can go a really long way.
And also I'll just say to your listeners, Doug, appreciative inquiry is a tool that we've adopted, and that's where we're asking questions in a positive, future-oriented way. There's a whole science, David Cooperrider up in Cleveland with the university there, has created that, and we craft our questions using the appreciative inquiry approach that Case Western Reserve, and that helps get at people don't want to be addressed with negativity. They want to have hope and moving forward. So we ask positive, forward-leaning questions because the question and the quality of the question will lead you going forward, or it will lead you going down into unhealth. So asking positive, forward questions is the approach we take.
So good. I want to wrap up a little bit about the assessment and ask you a question. So for those listening, and again, really encourage you to check out Best Christian Workplaces. Just Google them. You'll find them if you're interested in this. And again, if you want to email me at DougSmith@L3 Leadership, I can connect you with Al and his team. But basically, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically you get a score back from the actual assessment, and then there's a score of a 1 to 5 basis. And if you get a 4 or above, you're certified as a best Christian workplace. If you have a 4.25 or above, you're actually flourishing, which we've never gotten. We've been best Christian workplace for a long time. So it's like, I cannot wait. We'll take you out, Al, and celebrate when we hit that 4.25.
There we go.
That's what you measure. And so, you can always see where you are year to year, which I love. But one thing you also measure is employee engagement. Can you talk a little bit about that? We talked about the flourishing culture, and we'll get back into that. But how do you measure employee engagement, and why is that important?
So the science around this has really transitioned. It used to be morale. What's the morale of the staff, and then it got to be, well, how satisfied is the staff? And now the science has come to engagement, and we kind of think of engagement as the level of energy and passion that people bring to their work. Are they bringing their whole selves to work? And so if people are bringing passion and energy to their jobs and to their work, we believe that they're engaged. And when you've got, a lot of engaged employees, you're going to make great progress as an organization. That way, we ask 4 bottom line questions. We call them engagement indicators. Would I recommend my workplace to others as a great place to work? Am I satisfied or proud to work in the organization? Do I think it's a great workplace? And am I willing to put in the extra energy beyond my normal job to make sure the organization is successful? So, those are kind of core questions that we ask that get at engagement. And then, of course, the rest of the questions help define these are the drivers that create overall engagement. Doug, we've talked a lot about in the past the Great Resignation. The post-COVID Great Resignation. There's been even our discussion earlier today about turnover and so on. But I believe that the antidote to the Great Resignation, to the high levels of turnover that organizations face, is actually a flourishing workplace culture. And the financial impact, reducing the level of churn and turnover in Christian workplaces, is huge. And so the culture is the answer. And having a flourishing workplace culture will improve the health of your culture.
Yeah, and last thing I just want to throw out there on the assessment. I don't know how recently you added this, but you've also added questions in the assessment around diversity, equity, and inclusion as well, and how much your organization values that, which obviously is very, very important as well. Can you talk about that at all and how that's worked out?
Absolutely, because, again, what is one of the biggest issues that we have in the body of Christ and in our country, and that is the whole diversity issue. And I've just done a podcast myself on racial equity and reconciliation. And I believe, again, in the body of Christ, we should have the best relationships across genders, across races. And I believe in my bones, and again, we're all given gifts, spiritual gifts, skills, unique background and experiences, that it's the body of Christ that should be on the front line of organizations that work in a diverse way. I also believe, core in my bones, that it's diversity that brings innovation and effectiveness as an organization. Like you, I've done all of the Myers-Briggs and the Enneagrams and all of these, and I remember sitting around a room, actually in my previous role as a consulting leader, and everybody was kind of the same as me, and I realized we're only looking at things from a very, very narrow angle, and if we're going to really be effective, we need a broad range, a diverse view of views. And when I've seen over and over again, when we have diversity, we bring diversity to the workplace, then we're able to create more effective solutions to the problems we face.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that. Before we go in the lightning round, I want to kind of go through the road to flourishing and just go through those 8 characteristics. And, you said you've been able to serve 1,500 organizations, which is incredible. And obviously your team has as well. But, I'm sure you've gotten to see all kind of ways that flourishing organizations flourish in each of these categories. So I'm just, as we go through these, if I say, fantastic teams, I would just love to hear you say, here's something I've seen that makes up fantastic teams, or that I've seen a great organization do. And so let's just start with that one. Fantastic teams. What have you seen that's really, really great out there?
Well, again, when teams are working together and they're able to work across departments and they're able to resolve conflict and they focus on excellence, these are fantastic teams. I mean, don't we all want to be on a team like that? So that's what I think about fantastic teams.
Life-giving work.
So what people want to do, what Gen X, Gen Z, people want work that's going to help give them life, that meaning and purpose in their jobs, where they're doing work that's designed for them, where their gifts, their skills are able to actually be part of the work they're doing, where they're in an environment where there's some fun, and where they're able to exercise the gifts that they're given without micromanagement. So life-giving work is what that is.
Outstanding talent.
Don't we want to work on teams that are going to win? Where you've got where you're able to attract, you're able to retain, you're able to promote and reward the best talent. We all want to be on teams that are going to win, and that takes outstanding talent to do that.
Uplifting growth.
Well, I oftentimes have heard the joke, oh, you're going to spend all that money on development? What if people leave? And then the response is, well, yeah, but what if people stay the same and they stay? We need people, and we need organizations that are going to invest in the development of people going forward so that they can grow. Because, when we do the same one year as the next, we're falling behind. And also part of uplifting growth is the fact that the frontline leader is the key to organization effectiveness.
Yeah, I'm curious. You talked about, investing in development of your people and organizations that you've seen really thrive in this area of growth. How much is it they have leaders that are, like you said, they're direct supervisors who are pouring into them and actually being a role model and example to them versus, hey, we sent them to this leadership program. We give them a book every month. We have, XYZ. I'm sure it's a combo, but I'd be curious your thoughts on that.
The research says, Doug, 70% of training is on the job. It's through the supervisor. It's through working with somebody that knows how to do. 70% is based on that. 10% is based on other mentorship. 10%, 20% is, and then 10% is based on going to a workshop or a conference or reading a book. So it's on the job training is the core to uplifting growth.
Next category is one I'm sure that has led to some interesting conversations: rewarding compensation.
Yeah, so having fair pay and benefits is important for an organization to be sustainable and to grow. And in Christian organizations, this is oftentimes just not talked about. And so I recommend every organization have a compensation philosophy that they talk about. You may not be paying at competitive levels for marketplace companies, but if you define what your compensation philosophy is and communicate that and keep it present and active, then you'll be better off. It's the lowest indicator. It's got the lowest weight of the 8 is rewarding compensation.
That's fascinating. We talked a little bit about inspirational leadership. Talk to us about sustainable strategy.
Yeah, sustainable strategy is, people, and this is really true for millennials, people want to work for an organization where the work they're doing is making a difference. Much like a rescue mission work, when you know that you're making a difference in somebody's life, that is important to you. So that's, and so having a strategy that meets the needs of those you serve is critical. But also part of that is that it's got to be, throughout the organization where there's common goals, that people understand what the goals are, they're accountable to the goals, and they are achieving what the organization hopes to achieve. And people will say, oh, I just want to have a great workplace, and we may not get anything done. And I say, you'll never have a good workplace. You'll never have a flourishing workplace unless you're able to get things done as a group. And that's what a leadership's job is, to make sure that you can get things together as a group and accomplish what you're set out to accomplish.
Just a small rabbit trail. You talked about, obviously I work at a rescue mission. The other thing I love about the assessment tool that you do is you work with obviously Christian workplaces, but you can actually benchmark against other organizations just like yours. For instance, we're benchmark in our BCWI survey and assessment. We benchmark ourselves against all the other rescue missions nationally who do the same assessment. So it really gives you a sense of how you're doing. I'm assuming it's the same for churches and other nonprofits, but
it's by sector. That's right. Yep.
Yeah, I love that. So if I haven't tried to, I'm a promoter. If you're not sold yet, I don't know if I can do much better. But I'm telling you, leader, get this in your organization. The last one I've actually found to be probably the most challenging. It's healthy communication. You hear all the time in leadership, like after you have to say something, once you're sick of saying something, you should say it twice as much after that. And it's like, the more I grow in my leadership journey, I'm like, I hate that, but it's true. What have you learned about healthy communication?
I have a mentor who said communication is like communicating to a parade. People are joining and leaving the parade all the time. And as they're walking on in the parade, they're changing their mind. So you've got to say these things over and over. As you say, when you think you're tired of communicating, you're just halfway. I used to, as a Myers-Briggs ENTJ, I used to think it was inconsiderate to repeat myself because I've said something and it's most efficient. I've said it once. I'm not going to bother you by saying it again. And I realized how wrong that was, and how, yes, you need to communicate over and over, 7 times, 9 times. I've heard different numbers, but that's so critical to have constant communication. But the key to healthy communication is seeking suggestions, listening to feedback, acting on those suggestions, and just completely, drawing that circle. Seek suggestions humbly, listen to the feedback, and then act on the suggestions, and then remind everybody, hey, the reason we're doing this is because you asked us to do it, and that's why we're doing it. And now we've done it. And so thanks for your suggestions. We've listened to you and we've implemented it, and that will engage your employees.
Yeah, I love that visual of the parade. I was actually very similar to you. I used to, whether it was speaking engagements or speaking to staff, I used to always think like I have to have new and fresh content every time. Like I cannot recycle any content. And my friend said, man, he just had this, he coined this phrase. He said, Doug, repetition leads to retention. Yeah. Like you have to repeat over and over again. So that was so good. That's really the overview of the flourishing model. Is there anything else? I want to go into the lightning round, but anything else you want to share with Best Christian Workplaces or the assessment or tool?
I'd encourage our listeners, think of this, of the culture journey in 3 steps. First, you need to discover where you are. Earlier, I remember it's like, well, the leader's first job is to understand and communicate reality. So discover reality. That's the survey. That's doing discovery groups. It's understanding, hey, we've got to discover where the health of our culture is. And then the second phase is build. Okay, what's the action plan? What are we going to do to actually improve our culture? And then grow is implement those things. Discover, build, and grow. And I really recommend an annual cycle like you're doing at Light of Life, where you're doing that. And even after we've got organizations that have surveyed every year in the last 20 years. And they say to us, we learn in the survey, we learn by asking these questions, something that's happening on the front line that we would not have discovered for 2 or 3 years. And so it just really helps you keep in tune. It keeps, the world is changing, our organizations change. So that cycle of discover, build, and grow is really, really important.
Yeah, and so we'll include links to Best Christian Workplaces in the show notes, as well as Al's book, The Road to Flourishing. Again, phenomenal book, especially if you're already utilizing this tool or you're going to. I would really encourage you, if this is what you're measuring your culture on, take your leadership team through this and make sure that this is on the forefront of their minds as they lead their teams on a daily basis. So with the time we have left, I want to dive into the lightning round, which has nothing to do with culture, but it's just a bunch of fun questions I ask every interview. And the first is just, what is the best advice you've ever received and who gave it to you?
Yeah, again, much the same mentor that communicated with me about the communicating to a parade. That might be one of the best advice I've received. He's given me so much more advice. I'd just encourage every person listening, have a mentor, have more than one mentor who is helping you along the journey of life.
If you could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would it say?
You can only give what you have.
What's one or two books that you either give away most often or that have impacted you the most deeply?
Yeah. Recently, I've been giving away the book Traction by Gina Whitman.
Come on.
Yeah.
You're speaking my love language. Yeah.
We implemented Traction, the EOS system here at the Best Christian Workplaces a couple of years ago. It's just helped to transform our effectiveness as a group. So,
are you self-implementing or have you hired an implementer?
We've self-implemented. Well, we have worked with a couple of consultants for specific things, but yeah, and we've really enjoyed it. It's given us an operating system. I was even thinking about that in our discussion earlier. It gives us an operating system that we can follow that's effective, and the accountability that comes with it is outstanding. Yeah. Another book I recommend often because I'm in these conversations is Transitions by William Bridges. It's not a new book, but people that are going through transitions. And I've gone through one recently myself as I've kind of turned over the CEO role, trying to stay out of management of the Best Christian Workplaces. I'm still the co-founder. I carry the vision. It's in my heart. But yeah, it's a transition.
Oh, we can talk about Traction after we get off this. Now I'm excited. What do you wish, or what's something that people may not know about you that you wish they knew?
I'm pretty much an open book, Doug, but I'm a closet mystic.
Say more. What does that mean?
I at the beginning of the year, I take 3 days. I go to a Catholic facility offsite. I sit in quiet. I pray. I've walked the Camino de Santiago a couple of different routes. I read St. John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila. As a Protestant, you don't hear a lot of people focusing on those mystics from the Middle Ages, Julian of Norwich, and so on. But and if you read page 8 in the book, you'll see why I probably would say that.
Thanks for sharing that. You get to spend time with a lot of leaders, and I'm curious, outside of just the consultant questions that you would ask, if you get to have dinner with a high-level leader, do you have a go-to question or two that you always ask when you get to spend time with them?
I always ask about their background and how they got to where they are. I'm always interested in, and the way I think of that is, how did God bring you to this point, where you're able to do what you're doing? That's fascinating.
What's your biggest leadership pet peeve?
My arrogance is my leadership pet peeve. I just am turned off by arrogance, and I see it too many times.
I don't know if you have a bucket list, but if you do, what's something you've done in your life that you think everyone should experience before they die?
5 years ago, I walked the 500 miles on the Camino de Santiago from France to Santiago de Compostela. And it took me 30 days. I went with 33 days. I went with my daughter at the time.
Wow.
And I was 65, she was 30, and it was just a great experience. I've talked to a lot of people who have talked about, or, and there's more and more who are discovering it. I just think it was great. When I retired from the CEO role, just last June 30, I then went on the Portuguese Camino, 170 miles up from Porto up to Santiago, again, just to celebrate 20 years of God's faithfulness and kind of to think about, well, what's the next 20 years going to look like?
Wow. I've never heard of either of those, so I'm going to have to look those up and maybe add them to my list. And it did spark, so I'm a dad of 4. I have 2 boys, 2 girls. And Andy Stanley and his wife just came out with a new book on parenting, and I love it. They have a goal. They said our goal in parenting was always we want to raise kids who, when they're old enough, they want to spend time with us when they no longer have to.
Yeah. And
I don't know why, but when you said that you did this walk with your daughter when she was 30, I mean, my heart just lit up. I'm like, I have a 6-year-old daughter. I'm like, oh man, that's like if I could fast forward my life and see that, I'd be in heaven. Any parenting advice for the parents listening?
Understand your children's unique gifts and encourage them, and be patient. Yeah.
If you could go back and have coffee with yourself at any age that you actually would have listened to yourself, what age would have you had coffee with yourself, and what would you say?
I would probably go back to a 30-year-old. So at 40, I was I was a workaholic, and I would have said to my 30-year-old self, don't let yourself get consumed by work.
Wow, that's powerful. At the end of your life, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to be remembered for?
Somebody that loves Jesus and loves others.
That's so good. Eh?
Yep.
Anything else you want to leave leaders with?
I'll say, Doug, feedback is a gift. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. I'd encourage any leader to shepherd the flock that God has entrusted to them. That's 1 Peter 5:2. Shepherd the flock that God has entrusted to you. And how do you know if you're actually doing a good job shepherding? Well, you have to ask the sheep. And so, the health of the flock that you're entrusted to is your role and responsibility. And so get feedback about the effectiveness of your leadership. It's a gift. It's the breakfast of champions.
Well, thank you for providing a tool that gives that feedback. Very, very grateful for you following God's call in your life. Very grateful for how God is using you in the kingdom. I know it's changed our organization, and there's 1,500 organizations, and I'm sure in the next season, Best Christian Workplaces, with your successor, it'll go even further. So just thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you, Doug. This has really been a pleasure. God bless you. Thank you for your leadership and your podcast. I've enjoyed listening to it myself, and I pray that any leader who's participating will grow. Man, thanks, Al.